Writing a manga is difficult, and apparently ending a manga in a way that the fans of that manga like is even more difficult. Because it feels as though over the course of the last couple of years, there's been an epidemic of popular shonen manga that haven't quite stuck the landing that is ending their story. See, while some stories, like Kaiju number 8, opt for a simple, clean, and easy ending, unfortunately that kind of option only seems available for mangas that were already pretty simple to begin with. What happens when your manga's complex, hundreds of chapters long, filled with characters who need resolutions to their storylines, and so much more? Well, unfortunately, more often than not, those stories get unsatisfactory endings. But who in the manga space have been the worst offenders when it came to spoiling a perfectly good manga? Well, today I want to answer that question because today we're talking the worst endings in manga, ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video every single week, you guys can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We are on to Nechi and Hinata, and Hinata's getting dotted up. So, some of you are probably wondering, Nick, where'd you get the idea for today's video? Are you just upset about the state of manga? No. Not really. I've gotten a couple of emails over the course of the last couple of days here of people asking me to review the 3 new chapters of Black Clover that recently dropped. And while I would usually review these chapters of Black Clover because I've reviewed almost all of the chapters of Black Clover since it went quarterly, I don't know, 2.5 years ago, I've kind of gotten to a spot where Black Clover where I don't really care anymore. And it's not so that I don't care. I mean, I am still reading the manga, but you don't care. Unless I'm doing some overarching video talking about how the ending of Black Clover isn't necessarily hitting, well, the views don't really show up. And honestly, I can't blame you, because the ending of Black Clover has been, well, at best, weird. I mean, ignore for a second that the manga went quarterly, like, I don't know, 20 chapters before its end, and therefore we only really got 1 or 2 or now 3 chapters every single 3 months, which basically killed any and all momentum that Black Clover had as it was coming to its ending. But also, the ending's just kind of been exhausting. Everyone who is important is fighting their own individual battles. Everybody's getting nonsensical upgrades. Noelle tames a literal god of the ocean off screen and then uses it to defeat her mother, who's a paladin now. Asta gives anti-magic to all of the Black Bulls, so him having anti-magic doesn't really mean anything because he can just hand it out to everybody else. Nobody is dying, even though they're all being critically injured on account of Charmy's magical food, Mimosa's plant magic, and the Witch Queen's blood magic. Yuno gets a ridiculously powerful new form using Asta's anti-magic after being revealed to have 2 grimoires and spirit magic. Like, that wasn't enough. The scientist girl, who's got a big thing for experimenting on Asta, creates an anti-magic gun. And if we're being real, Lucius is kind of a left field final enemy. Like, yeah, it's a cool reveal that Julius Novachrono, the Wizard King, has actually been evil the entire time, has been suffering from a split personality. But, like, I don't know. Lucius just did an entire spell that took every single grimoire from the entirety of the Clover Kingdom. Now he's got every kind of magic. And it's just like, it's like a safe ending. It feels contrived. And I'm just kind of sick of the death baiting and everybody getting anti-magic. It was supposed to be Asta's thing. Now it's everyone's thing. They won't stop giving Yuno and everybody else upgrades. And, like, while the fights themselves have been pretty cool and they'll probably be sick when they're animated, I don't know. The ending's not doing it for me. So Black Clover is our honorable mention because it's technically not over yet. So let's get to our actual first entry, because coming up at number 7, our list of the worst manga endings in recent years, we have MHA. Now, honestly, if it were up to me, I probably wouldn't even have MHA on this list. However, I know a lot of MHA fans really disliked how the story came to its end. However, I personally really enjoyed the ending of My Hero Academia. So much so that I literally posted a YouTube video called My Hero Academia's Ending is Perfect. And boy, oh boy, did I find that I was in the minority. And honestly, now that I've spent more time with MHA's ending and heard a lot of the key complaints that MHA fans had, yeah, no, I kind of get how they could be upset. See, because MHA did the thing that JJK did, which is to say that MHA ends on chapter 430. And therefore, if you're reading MHA on something like the Shonen Jump app, the last bit of MHA you'll be able to read is chapter 430, which as a chapter introduces us to a rather large time skip that shows us that Deku, after his battle against Shigaraki, had lost his connection to One for All. And therefore, Deku had gone full circle. He had returned back to being quirkless. And thus, chapter 430 hones in on the quirkless Deku, who is supposedly working his dream job, which is teaching at UA. However, there's this undertone that Deku is kind of depressed about where his life has ended up. All of his friends are famous heroes and have been famous heroes for like a decade, while Deku is stuck at UA teaching hero courses. And while this does give him the opportunity to reach out to the youth that he sees himself in, it's basically established established that everybody from Class 1A has left Deku behind. They're all either too busy being heroes, too famous, or no longer in Japan to ever hang out with Deku. So now Deku no longer has friends, no longer has a quirk, and is no longer a hero. However, before the story can come to its actual conclusion, All Might grabs the ending scene and gives Deku a super suit created by the Shields, similar to the suit that he used to fight against All for One. And thus the story ends with Deku actually rejoining all of his friends from Class 1A to become a hero once again, using the power of this suit. However, this ending leaves a lot to be desired. No ship is confirmed for literally anybody from Class 1A. We have no idea how powerful Deku is or what his hero ranking ends up being. And considering the fact that the beginning of MHA literally starts with Deku saying, "This is the story of how I became the world's greatest hero," the ending of the manga not showing us Deku as the world's greatest hero kind of means the beginning was a lie. Especially when you consider the fact that thematically the ending of MHA kind of hammers home the fact that Deku was never able to achieve the same level of strength as All Might. However, because the ending of MHA was so poorly received, Horikoshi ended up dropping something known as Chapter 431.5 and have fun finding it in any official forum. However, over the course of this chapter, we get a look into basically what everybody from Class 1A is doing with their superhero lives, with a heavy focus on Uchaku. And we even get an update of what the hero world rankings look like right now, and where individual members of Class 1A fall in those hero rankings. But probably the most important thing is that the chapter ends with the confirmation that Deku and Uchaku end up together, which is pretty much all that anybody was looking for. Now, I personally think between the combination of the epilogue and MHA's actual ending, this all wraps up to be a pretty good manga ending. However, there was a month or two between the release of Chapter 430 and the epilogue, and so MHA fans absolutely had the right to be up in arms. Now, some people also just don't like how the battle between Deku and Shigaraki shakes out, which is understandable, but Deku is pretty much the closest thing we get to anime Superman. He always sees the best in people, and therefore him trying to reach out to the child in Shigaraki, to me, always made a fair amount of sense. And thus, that's why I believe MHA should be at the bottom of this list. But unfortunately, I can't say the same for our number 6 spot, because coming up at number 6 on our list of the worst manga endings in recent years, we have Naruto. Listen, I love Naruto, probably more than you. It is literally my job to talk about Naruto, but I can still sit here and acknowledge the fact that the ending of the manga is not good. I have released several videos talking about how I would rewrite the ending of Naruto, because a lot of the decisions made by Kishimoto towards the end of Naruto were either because his editors are rushing him to finish the story, or because he was setting up the Naruto universe for the introduction of Boruto. And honestly, when you take into consideration Boruto, it makes the ending of Naruto a little bit better, but I just want to talk about Naruto today. See, the number one complaint that anybody is going to lodge to you about the ending of Naruto is the fact that Madara is taken out by Black Setsu and replaced by Kaguya, and that is bad. But quite honestly, it's not even the worst thing that happens towards the end of Naruto. If we're being real with ourselves, Madara's death at the hand of Black Setsu and being replaced by Kaguya is kind of the cherry on top of the terrible sundae that is Naruto's ending. See, because long before Madara takes the hardest, longest black back shot I've seen since Riley Reid's prime years, there was a litany of problems that was already setting up Naruto to come to a stumbling, bumbling end. Well, obviously the ending of Naruto's manga is a lot better than the ending of Naruto's anime on account of the fact that the manga didn't have filler issues. That doesn't mean that the war arc wasn't still way too long in the manga. While an entire army of Naruto's past characters being brought back to life using Edo Tensei did leave for some emotional moments like Team 10's battle against Asuma, Minato and Naruto, and Itachi and Sasuke's final goodbyes, and so much more, it also kind of distracted from the more important fights. Not to mention the fact that even though Naruto prided itself on building up a cast of interesting and powerful characters, by the ending of the story, because of the ridiculous scaling that both Obito and Madara underwent, the only people that were even remotely relevant to battle were Naruto and Sasuke. And they weren't relevant in battle because of the hard work that they had put in, but rather because Sky Ninja Daddy Hagoromo decided to bless them with powers that he could have blessed them with at really any point. Not to mention the fact that both Naruto and Sasuke are death baited, with Sasuke being stabbed to the chest by Madara, and Madara yanking out the half of Kurama that Naruto had inside of him. But Neji also rather pointlessly dies when it would have been much more emotionally hard-hitting to see somebody like Hayashi step in to save Neji, which would have broken down the whole caste system that the Hyugas have used for decades and generations. Naruto turns into Ninja Jesus and is able to fix Might Guy's heart even though he uses the 8 gates, and so much more. A literal laundry list of lazy writing decisions are made towards the end of Naruto's manga, and not only don't make a whole lot of sense within the context of the story, but also undermine a ton of the themes of the manga. Might Guy, being the literal last standing bastion of hard work equals strength, should have been the one to defeat Madara. Naruto and Sasuke being revealed as reincarnations of the children children of God strips away all of the hard work they've ever done, and them receiving a literal blessing that only they could get makes both of them, unfortunately, Mary Sue's. And unfortunately, even the introduction of Boruto doesn't necessarily excuse this writing decision, because the concept of Indra and Ashura's reincarnations stop with Naruto and Sasuke. I love Naruto. I also love Boruto. The ending of Naruto is bad. All those things can be true simultaneously. Kind of like how I can say I love Demon Slayer, but don't like its ending, which is a sentiment that a lot of people who have read Demon Slayer's manga agree with. And therefore, coming up at number 5 on our list of the worst manga endings in recent years, we have Demon Slayer. Listen, the ending of Demon Slayer's manga has the opposite problem of a lot of popular shonen manga, and for that, it does get credit. See, because while a lot of other shonen manga play it safe and try and make sure that everybody gets a happy ending, Demon Slayer goes the exact opposite way, killing off the vast, and I mean vast majority of its characters in a final battle arc that leaves you feeling hollow and empty. Not only because, more likely than not, your favorite character dies, but because the final battle against Muzan just simply doesn't deliver. See, while one would assume that the ending of the Infinity Castle arc would end with the biggest blowout battle against Muzan, as he is the king of the demons, that's not what happens. See, rather than giving Muzan the most emotionally hard-hitting and wide-scale battle, that honor, rather, goes to Upper Moon number 1, Kokya Shibu, who gets a ridiculously hype, ridiculously bloody, and ridiculously compelling final fight, filled with an incredible backstory and history about how the Demon Slayer Course came to be, and riding off the high of that incredible fight, we head into Muzan, who should be the BBEG, and yet Muzan's fight just simply doesn't deliver in the same way that Kokya Shibu's does, mostly because prior to this final battle, Muzan is poison, and thus the demon that's been hyped up as the king of demons and unbeatable by anybody, even if they combine their forces, becomes beatable, like real beatable, and thus he simply doesn't live up to the hype that we've been told about the entire story. And then after the final battle against Muzan is wrapped up, we have to deal with the fact that everybody who awoke a Demon Slayer mark during these final battles is gonna die at like 25. And not only that, the entire Demon Slayer story was a dream. No, I'm not kidding. Or like, kind of a dream. A dream from a descendant of Zenitsu and Nezuko, who's reading Zenitsu's telling of his time in the Demon Slayer Corps. And thus Demon Slayer kind of falls into the same trappings of Naruto, where it kind of shoots its own ending in the foot to promote its spin-off manga, Demon Slayer Kimetsu Academy. And thus the last 2 chapters of Demon Slayer take place in the modern day, where the descendants of Nezuko and Zenitsu bump into all the reincarnations of all of the Hashira and other people who die in the Infinity Castle arc. It's real bizarre. But bizarre is better than bad, which is what a lot of people called our number 4 spot's manga ending, because coming up at number 4 of worst manga endings in recent years, we have Attack on Titan. Now listen, there has never been a bigger dichotomy between how people received the manga ending of a story and the anime ending of a story as there has been with Attack on Titan. Manga readers, probably because we're all miserable, hated the ending of AOT. However, anime watchers loved the ending of AOT. But why would there be such a drastic difference? Good question. Because the anime, it changes the ending by like a lot. In the manga, when Armin and Eren are talking about all the things that Eren did for the Island of Paradis, Armin thanks Eren for turning himself into a mass murderer for their sake. Yeah, Armin thanks Eren for killing 80% of the like, can you even begin to wrap your mind around how that's the last possible thing Armin would ever say? Now in the anime, they switch this moment to Armin saying, oh, when all this is over, I'll meet you in hell because we both deserve to burn for the things that we've done, which, like, that makes sense. Of course, Armin would be culpable for the things that he's done. He's an incredibly emotionally balanced person. Why on God's green earth would he thank Eren for becoming a mass murderer? On top of this, in the anime, Armin literally grabs Eren by the coat and is like, how could you kill 80% of humanity? Now, where the anime and the manga did align is the fact that Eldia and Paradis still don't like each other, even though Eren squashed 80% of humanity, and thus essentially Eren wiping out 80% of humanity accomplished nothing. Like, yes, it obviously had the added benefit of making all of his friends into the heroes that were able to destroy him, which I guess was his goal the whole time, and now his friends are trying to broker peace between Eldia and Paradis, but the Jaegerists are still around, they're still a problem, and now they're emboldened by the fact that they literally have a martyr in Eren. Tie all this into the fact that the Island of Paradis no longer has Titan Shifter abilities, and now, they're just people. that the entire world hates. So Eren squashed a fair part of the world, made everybody hate the people that he came from, and then stripped them of their powers by erasing the paths. But don't worry, Mikasa buried his head under the tree that he always used to fall asleep under. But in the ending, that's all that happens. In the anime ending, we see a dove fly down to Mikasa as she's sitting at the base of this tree crying, and it wraps her scarf around her neck to show her that Eren is still with her. Doesn't happen in the manga. What we do see in the manga is that Mikasa probably couples up with Jean, has a kid, and then brings Jean and her kid to visit Eren's grave, which is kind of crazy. But then in both the anime and the manga, war does find its way to the island of Paradis, and its safety is dashed against the rocks. Once again establishing the fact that everything that Eren ever didn't amount to anything, as the entire island is wiped off the map. But don't worry, that tree that Eren was buried under is still there, and now it's got a big hole in the side for this little boy and his dog to stumble into, apparently reconnecting with the founding Titan and starting the entire cycle over again. And while this could be meta commentary on the cyclical nature of war and humankind, it's really not what anybody was looking for in the ending of Attack on Titan. They wanted Eren reunited with his friends, they wanted Eren and Mikasa to end up together, and while in war can't always be sunshine and rainbows, this ending is a massive lack of both sunshine and rainbows. So the anime ending is much better. But we're talking manga. But speaking of mangas that I've made a fair amount of money talking about, next up on our list at the number 3 spot for the worst ending in mangas in recent years, we have JJK. Listen, I've made entire videos talking about how the ending of this manga didn't sit right with me. And I'm gonna be real with you. Majuro is actually kind of helping, as Gege is taking the sequel of JJK, Majuro, which some of you may not know is out, but it is. There's already 10 chapters. It's very good. But anyways, Gege is actually using the JJK sequel, Majuro, tie up a couple of the loose ends that were left hanging with the ending of JJK. However, on account of the fact that Majuro is only gonna be about 30 chapters long, and therefore it's already 1/3 through its expected runtime, it seems as though the sequel, which has dedicated a large amount of its runtime to tying up those loose ends, isn't gonna be able to tie them all up. Because that's the problem with JJK's manga ending. Obviously, I can't speak on how the anime is going to end on account of the fact that the anime is still very much running, but JJK's manga left more loose ends than a frayed rope. Not only did the Culling Games end in a completely unsatisfactory way, with Kenjaku's death coming at the hands of a surprise feat by Yuta piloting Gojo's body to accomplish a grand total of nothing, Yuji's domain expansion barely being explained, and while very few characters died during the Culling Games, they also happened to be fan favorite characters. But JJK was one of the most complex manga in years, with deep in-universe politics, an incredible cast of characters, and a power system that took a PhD to fully understand. One would assume in order to wrap up that kind of universe satisfyingly, you're gonna have to write one hell of an ending. And one hell of an ending is not what Gege delivered. See, not only does Sukuna binding vow his way through the final fight against the Kusakabe coalition, pretty much invalidating everything we'd learned about Jujutsu up until that point, but so many interesting existing plot lines that were set up earlier on in the manga are not closed out. America invades the Culling Game, abducts Japanese sorcerers, and then nothing is ever said about it. Outside of the fact that some sorcerers are gonna have to be sent to America in order to get them back. The end result of the Culling Games, which is supposed to be all of Japan coalescing into one ridiculously powerful cursed spirit, never came to pass, and probably the first ever documented case of a worst case scenario being highlighted in anime and not ever being seen. Kenjaku's death was unsatisfying. Yuji's power-up kind of came out of nowhere, and Sukuna's death was unsatisfying. And while we do get cool reveals, like the return of Nobara, it just feels kind of tacked on. Not to mention Kenjaku is maybe revealed to be still alive and working with Takaba to be a comedy duo, which we never hear more about. We don't know what happens to any of the royal clans of the Jujutsu Society, now that the majority of them have been wiped out and the higher-ups of the Jujutsu Society have all been killed by Gojo. We don't know what happens to the barriers all across Japan that now can no longer be set up or maintained on account of the fact that Tengen died at the hands of Kenjaku. And while some of these hanging plot threads have been answered by Majuro, like the idea that Japanese citizens are being abducted all the time so that other people can tap into their cursed energy as an energy source, and that the Jujutsu higher-up system is now just a council of different age sorcerers, amongst some other reveals, the ending of JJK's manga doesn't answer any of these questions. And the ending of JJK was so maligned that, like with Horikoshi and MHA, Gege had to release an additional chapter. An additional chapter that focuses on Yuka and Tsurugi, Yuji and the girl that I guess is his love interest, Nobara and Sukuna and Durame. And well, this chapter does a good job of closing out these individual storylines as they pertain to all of these characters, and therefore gave a slightly more satisfying ending to JJK. All of the hanging plot threads were unfortunately left hanging. And thus, for those who wanted to see one of the most ambitious and complex complex manga universes established in years come to an end in a way that made sense for the story. Well, unfortunately, they didn't get that. But Yuji held his crush's hand, so good job. But at least JJK got an update and a sequel that allowed for its previously bad ending to at least be slightly patched. However, the same cannot be said for our number 2 spot, because coming up at number 2 for the worst manga endings in recent years, we have The Promised Neverland. Listen, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that have never read The Promised Neverland. And more than that, you probably stopped watching The Promised Neverland after season 1. And let me tell you right now, both of those decisions were the correct ones. Because not only is season 2 of Promised Neverland absolute garbage, but also the manga is absolute garbage. At least after what was supposed to be adapted in season 2 of the anime, Goldie Pond. See, The Promised Neverland starts as a horror manga, and it stays a horror manga until after Goldie Pond, what was supposed to be adapted in season 2 of the anime. However, after Goldie Pond, for some reason, the story shifts from a horror manga to one more politically focused that tries to breach the topics of coexistence between humans and the demons and reforming the demon world. And the human world, which had been hyped up over the course of like 150 chapters, is barely explored, as the manga basically ends the second that Emma and the rest of the crew get there. And when Emma gets to the human world, finally, she loses all of her memories of the demon world, which kind of just erases everything that's happened to her. It erases all of her deep bonds, all of her trauma, all of the character arcs she had to undergo to get to this moment. And what's worse is that it's widely believed that this is not how the manga was supposed to end, because there's been interviews with the author and the illustrator for The Promised Neverland where they've revealed that The Promised Neverland was not only supposed to be longer, but also substantially darker. See, Neverland wasn't supposed to just be the Gracefield house. It was supposed to be the entire world, symbolizing an endless cycle of oppression. And whenever the kids escaped one level of oppression, they would find a new, worse level, tying into themes of false freedom. The outside world, that is outside of the Gracefield house, was supposed to be openly complicit in the farm system. Emma and Norman were supposed to perpetually clash, as Emma represented compassion and Norman represented utilitarianism. And over the course of these interviews, it's revealed that Emma was supposed to die, to sacrifice herself to give freedom to all the other children. But rather, what we got from the actual ending of Promised Neverland is that every single person got exactly what they wanted from the story. Norman, even though he's basically a war criminal, is forgiven immediately. In the supposed horror manga about kids getting eaten, gets this ridiculously upbeat and overly optimistic ending, which feels rushed and thematically mixed, leaving everybody who for some reason was still reading the manga to feel as though they'd wasted their time. And thus, Promised Neverland gets our number 2 spot. However, at least Promised Neverland has an ending, which I can't say for our number 1 spot, because coming up at number 1 on our list of the worst manga endings in recent years, we have Prison School. Now, I understand when I'm talking about Prison School, a lot of you probably either have no idea what I'm talking about or immediately identifying me as a gooner. And both of those are fair complaints. However, sue me, I liked Prison School. I thought it was funny. You know what I didn't find funny? The ending of Prison School. See, for those of you who don't know, Prison School is an ecchi comedy manga revolving around a primarily all-female school that allows some boys in. However, those some boys who do get let in keep doing stupid, pervy things, and thus they get basically sent to prison. But school, hence the Prison School. Anyways, throughout the entire story, a love triangle is set up between the main character, Kiyoshi, his main crush, Chiyo, and an eccentric, unpredictable girl by the name of Hannah who's obsessed with Kiyoshi. And thus, as we head into the final arc of Prison School, one assumes that there's going to be some kind of emotional payoff for this love triangle. Kiyoshi's going to make a choice between Chiyo or Hannah. And Kiyoshi does try to make a choice. He tries to confess to Chiyo. However, Hannah interrupts in the confession, and the whole situation kind of devolves. Now, at this point, it's kind of important to establish the fact that Prison School lost the plot about halfway through its manga. It was originally a satire of the ecchi genre that had some really funny jokes and some weighty discussion of what the genre entails, kind of devolved into just a stupid slapstick ecchi by the end of the story. And in no situation is that better displayed than how this story ends. See, because over the course of Prison School, while we do see some actual character development from our main cast, that makes you believe that these otherwise irredeemable characters are about to undergo some form of redemption, completely fumbles this entire idea in lieu of slapstick comedy. See, because instead of Kiyoshi being an adult and confessing his feelings to Chiyo, rather he gets caught wearing a pair of her underwear, and then we see everyone's reaction to him wearing her underwear. And that's how the manga ends. Kiyoshi goes to admit his feelings to his main crush in an adult moment, and then mid-joke about the fact that he's been wearing her underwear this entire time, the manga just ends. So not only do we get no graduation from Prison School, we get no admittance of Kiyoshi's feelings for Chiyo, no emotional growth for Kiyoshi as his character arc is immediately put in reverse by the fact that he hasn't changed at all. And meanwhile, Mari, who is by far and away the most interesting character in all of Prison School, is given speeches about freedom, which are ironic on account of the fact that these boys are in prison. The entire manga ends on a gag. Yeah, I mean, you just can't make that up. But I'm curious, is that the worst manga ending that you can think of? Let me know in the comments below. And when it goes down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go watch anime with satisfying endings, like Guilty Crown, Tokyo Ghoul, you get it.